So if you haven't already, let's take the time to find a comfortable, upright posture. So we're cultivating this sense, really arising out of our faith that it's useful to meditate, to tune in, to come right to the middle, to feel what's here to feel. So we let the posture reflect that intention, to be right in the middle, to be awake, to be wide open, to be released, at ease with conditions. So as if for the first time we're discovering what that posture feels like, looks like. And then we'll chant together the 3 refuges slowly. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Taking up the experience of the body sitting to begin with. Starting perhaps with the obvious touch points. And tuning into the simple elemental nature, like of pressure, pressure of the buttocks against the chair or the cushion, quality of touch, where the hands make contact, maybe with the thighs or the knees. Feeling the natural movement of the breath in the body. For example, that experience of movement as the abdominal wall expands with the inhalation and contracts with the exhalations. Not our idea of the body, or not our mental image of the body, or those things may be there, thoughts and mental images, but we're interested for a while in the physicality of the moment. And what is the experience of physicality when the mind isn't confused or drawn to our thoughts and mental images that we have? What is it to be open to physicality, all the movement of sensation, minus thoughts and images? Tuning in to the energy, the energetic quality. This is the body. Body is being known. And you can be using any traditional anchor, like tuning into the sensations of breathing in and breathing out, for example. And whenever the mind tunes into meaning, like any constructed meaning, whatever the mind might fabricate, even if it's a thought about our breath or about the practice, just be aware of that conceptual meaning the mind has constructed, but be aware of it as something being known in the moment. Oh yeah, thinking, planning, thinking about the practice. And notice how that meaning that the mind has constructed, there's always a sense of a me there. I, me, or mine. We don't have to get rid of it. We just want to notice that whole process of a thought or thoughts arising and the meaning that those thoughts construct and how there's a sense of a me. And with that, there's always some weight, some psychic weight or some squeeze. Even with relatively pleasant thoughts. So we just want to observe, and then observe what happens because we're observing thoughts and the meaning that the thoughts construct. And then return to the physicality as a kind of anchor, whether you're being present with the breath coming in and out as physical sensation, or more generally the whole body. So we use the awareness of bodily sensation, to stabilize and strengthen the continuity of present moment awareness. But we're in particular, we're interested in the thoughts that arise and the meaning that the thoughts construct, and learning how to see all of that as something being known. This mental activity, what we could call fabrication or construction. And usually embedded in thought is some sense of self, of me. So we want to just notice that without any judgment, without trying to get rid of anything. We just want to see the nature of the thinking mind, how these thoughts arise, how they construct meaning, and how this then passes away. So let's continue in silence for a while. It may initially feel quite awkward to be aware of thoughts, and in particular the meaning that these thoughts construct. Remember, we're not judging, we're not afraid of thoughts. Just want to see clearly the way it is, how it is that thoughts arise, meaning is constructed, feels personal. We want to see it as it actually is, as it actually unfolds. And then when observing in this open, spacious way, what is the effect of that? And it's actually appropriate to feel some quality of appreciation when you notice clearly this activity of mind, you notice the self-centered dramas and points of view and thoughts that are coming and going. Of course, you may not catch every one, but just feel good about noticing what is relatively subtle, how the thinking mind is creating meaning of various kinds, and how that meaning has that flavor, that self-centered flavor, even if it's subtle. Just to keep things really simple and clear, we notice there's sensation being known. So tune in. The truth, this particular truth of the present moment, that sensation is being felt or being known. And there's the experience of seeing, even if our eyes are closed, there is the visual experience that's being known here and now. So tune into that. Just receive the visual experience and know that it's being known. It's something being known. And there's sound also being known. And there's mental activity or thoughts being known, which of course would include emotion, which emotions can have also a visceral, physical sensation associated with them, but also generally have mental content as well, mental images and thoughts associated with the emotion. The mood, the quality of the heart, you could say. And to some degree, probably for most of us not dominant, smells and tastes being known. This is the whole of the present moment, these 6 things being known here and now. So if it feels more than that, then look at what feels more than sights being known, sounds being heard, sensations being felt, smells and tastes being smelt and tasted, and thoughts being known. If it feels more than that, then notice what that is. Oh, that's the meaning the thoughts are constructing, or the thoughts and sensations seem to construct. But it's just thoughts and sensation being known. So for the last few minutes, we're reducing our very human experience sitting here as one of these 6 things being known, or a combination of these 6 things being felt and known. Learning to trust our experience as it is. And it's actually quite important to have the sense that the deepest secrets, the depth of the Dharma, the Buddhist teachings, is all right here. It's a important deepening when wisdom sees clearly selfing being known. It sees the mind, due to habit, constructing a sense of self around some experience. And for wisdom to observe that as selfing being known. Without judgment. Couple moments to move the body, stretch a little if you'd like. Well, it's good to see everybody. Thanks for showing up. Chuck, would you turn the top lights up for us? While we're talking about Chuck, who's jumped in to help with program hosting tonight, we could use someone to program host here at the City Center next week or last week, week 4. So you can just check in with me after the program if you're willing to do that. That'd be great. And also somebody who's been around for 3 years or so or longer and would like to give a 5-minute talk about dana or generosity next week, that would be great. Just let me know. And we'll figure out a time for you to do that. And maybe I'll just mention while we're doing announcements, our sister organization, Twin Cities Vipassana Collective, is having a retreat in June, as they normally do. Usually it was Kamala Masters and Steve Armstrong, but this year Deborah Heltzer is teaching with Annie Nugent, assisted by Wynn Fricke. So there's still spaces for that retreat. Also, Wynn Fricke and Shelley Graff will be doing a retreat, I think that first weekend in June. There may be spaces, I think it might be full at the retreat center, but there's space on Zoom if you want to join in for that. I'll be doing a day-long retreat on Saturday the 24th. Plenty of space for that, online or in person. And lastly, Sarah Wilson and I will be leading the twice annual community practice intensive in June. We usually do it in June and December. A lot of you have done it. It's 17 days, so it's going to begin the 2nd of June and on the 21st. Maybe it's 18 days then, or 19. Anyway, 2nd of June, Monday night. And it's just a time when that group of people, usually there's about 50 of us, we increase our practice for those 18 days or so. And we meet on Monday nights, and we have a day-long retreat at the end on Saturday the 21st. And just, it's nice to share with each other, like, what happens when I put in a little bit more time, strengthen my resolve to be present during my daily life, maybe do a little bit more study during those days. So we can observe cause and effect. And there's more information about the Community Practice Intensive online. All the information is on our public calendar online. So you can go there and there will be a link for more information about that. So just look under Monday, the 2nd of June, and you'll see the listing for the Community Practice Intensive. And if you just want more of this kind of information, then get yourself on our weekly email. Common Ground sends out an email, usually on Thursdays every week. Usually Shelley or I write a little note, Dharma note, and then just we list all the things that are happening and any program changes. So it's a good thing to do if you feel part of the community and want to stay connected to what's happening at the center. There's so many things going on, community groups, and so it's, if you've been around and you haven't actually looked at all the stuff going on, because there may be other things that would be really supportive for you. Like for the first time ever, Richard Bonk's doing nature immersion this coming Saturday. He's been doing it at the Arboretum for a couple years now, but he's going to be offering it through Campground. He's a long-time community member. Saturday morning, this coming Saturday morning. I think it's 10:30 to 11:30 or 10 to 11:30 maybe, something like that. So, third week of our 4-week course on Anatta, the Buddhist teachings on impersonal nature, the not self. And remember, the Buddha, first of all, this is a teaching for deluded people, right? So we're going to use this as a skillful means to illuminate what we're not already seeing. It's not something that we believe in. I believe in the not self or the non-self, right? Because that just becomes another identity that the mind clings to and then argues about. Some of us probably remember, having these arguments about free will or self or not self. It's endless what the mind will cling to. So we want to use these teachings, especially the deeper teachings, we want to use them skillfully to liberate our heart. Like the whole point of whatever we do in the context of our meditation and studying the Buddhist teachings and putting those teachings into practice, the whole point is to understand like the release and the absence of release, right? The squeeze, so that we know how to navigate this human life. Right? We can live the life we're living free of that contraction. But we have to be a good student. We have to study self to release self, right? Because whatever self is, like whatever our sense, our self-centered sense is, it would always have to be a natural arising, right? It's not some mistake. It's something that needs to be understood. It's not that the self becomes a not self. It's really that whatever this is, we study it. This studies it. We're studying ourselves. And that changes our understanding of what this is. That's all that's changing, is the understanding of what this is. And it's easy, all of us could easily say, oh, I'm just a natural process. But it's not enough, right? But when wisdom, the mind, actually sees something, it's changed by that seeing. Just like some of the impactful experiences you've had in your life. I just talked to Omkar. A lot of you know Omkar. He and his partner just had a child a couple days ago. Things are going well. It was impactful. But, we're changed by these big experiences. And it's the same thing with insight. We experience something directly, immediately, and then the heart becomes changed. It's now the heart, the mind, whatever you want to call it, is the mind that saw that, experienced that. So when we see this life, this experience as nature, not referring back to I, me, or mine, we see it in its raw truth, right? Then it really challenges that depth of habit to project a mark on my experience. Because I've seen or experienced something. But we're never going to see or experience something if we don't look. We have to look in just the right place, which is here and now. That's what I meant when I said the secrets are all right here. I've had several of my teachers when I've been on long retreats, they'd say something to the effect, it's already here, it's right here. Which means it's in our ordinary self-centeredness that we find the truth we're looking for. We don't need to be ashamed of, sitting there and, obsessing about something stupid or something not stupid, right? Whatever our experience is perfectly adequate to see what we need to see. We don't need a different experience. We just have to cultivate a purity of interest in this experience that we're having. One of the classic ways, like we did tonight, I just want to review kind of what I tried to suggest tonight for the meditation instructions, that it can be a useful beginning at any sit, is just to realize that the moment is nothing more than those 6 sense gates. And just go through them, spend some time with physicality. Sensations are being known. Really get clear. Yeah, there is one aspect of what's happening here, like the pressure of the buttocks on the chair or cushion. Pressure being known. Or if there's some movement in the body, moving is being known. Or some heat or some coolness. Right? These are all elements of the body, of physicality, of sensation. Okay, there's that being known. And then we're sensitive to visual experience. Okay, seeing or visual experience is being known. Hearing is being known. To some degree, smells being smelled, tastes being tasted, however subtle that might be, generally when we're sitting. And then a very big one, and a very seductive one, thoughts, motions are being known. And that is the totality of what it is to be Mark, or to be a human being, or these 6 things being known. And our lives, it never deviates from these 6 things. But it always seems like being me's got to be more than that. Maybe that's true for you, but for me, my life, my reality is more substantial than that. I'm sorry. I got my whole past. We have all these sophisticated, and some of them are quite beautiful thoughts. But everything, we're not taking away from that. We're trying to understand what that is, the complexity and richness and terribleness, beauty of a human life. We're trying to understand what it is in a really direct and honest way. Oh, it is these 6 things being known. And then when that richness of my human richness manifests as some obsessive thought or some hopeful thought or some brilliant thought, or some really stupid thought, to see that that's also these 6 things being known. That's what's really important. You could call it a deconstruction or a reduction, but we don't want to be spellbound by our experience, and it's not done to be dismissive of our experience in any way. We can remind ourselves, I just want to see clearly, I just want to be real, I want to be intimate. I want to align with the truth of the moment, the truth of my life, the truth of my experience. When we talk about faith in Buddhism, we're really talking about this faith, confidence, that all we need to learn is here. It's helpful to have teachings, but the teachings are helpful only to the degree that they help us become more interested in the present moment. and in the immediacy of our own experience, not somebody else's experiences. The Buddha taught, no matter how we conceive of things, it will always be otherwise. So there's real, we need to construct meaning to be human, to be connected, especially as a social being. It's sort of the place we meet around the meaning you create, the meaning I create, and how those sort of play with each other. And it's the same with identity. There's a place for identity in Buddhism. We just don't want to be confused by our various identities. I'm white, I'm older, I'm well educated, I was sick a year and a half ago. All these parts of my identity that I have. I live over there, and all those things. I have a partner. So, those things can feel so rich, but it's a thought being known. And that richness is also that richness being known. So we're not saying, I shouldn't have a complicated feeling or a deep feeling. It's just that we want to understand that it's something being known, and whatever rich or not rich experience I'm having, that's it, it's that being known. Because the self-view, the habit of being confused, it's like that ancient simile of walking at dusk on a path we've walked before, but we see something on the path, but the light isn't good because it's, late in the day. And snake. And so, of course, we don't go that way because, it's not Minnesota, so the tropics where there are poisonous snakes. And but then that misperception of, let's say it was a branch or a rope that looked like a snake, that misperception, once we have it once, it's easier to have it a second and a third. And by the time we've had it 10 times, we've mistaken the rope for a snake. And we've thought about that snake, right? And then we start having this fixed view, there is a snake in that area of the path. It gets really established in the mind. It becomes like an edifice. It's hard to not see a snake. It helps us understand the divisiveness of our times because of how things grow and get ossified, fixed. And it's the same with the habit of projecting self. It's very real, right? It's as real as anything the mind constructs. And the spiritual practice is to understand what, this part of the mind that is fabricating, constructing meaning. Like the Buddha says, no matter how we conceive it, it will always be otherwise. So that's why, even the teachings of the Buddha's, famous story about the raft, I'm guessing most of you have heard it, but just the simple version is, all the teachings are like a raft. Somebody who's trying to get across, the Buddha taught in the floodplain of the Ganges River for most of his time, 45 years of teaching in northern India. And so getting across these rivers that flow into the Ganges, and that's a big deal. It's back in the day, not a lot of bridges, and you had to be pretty careful and strategic. And so, you'd build a raft, and you'd get across if you did a good enough job building the raft, and you picked the right place. But then once you get across where you cross the flood, you get to where you want to go, You don't carry the raft around with you. So the three characteristics, the truth of change, truth of experience, not capable of satisfying a self, and the impersonal nature, the not self teaching, these are the raft, right? So we've got a big boost because instead of having to make up our raft, the tradition hands us a raft. That's what the teachings are, they're a raft. Our job is to kind of understand what to do with these teachings. We could build a beautiful altar, and somebody with really good calligraphy skills could write the teachings down, and we could stick them in the altar, and we could do all kinds of devotional practice. And on some level, that those devotional practices actually can be skillful, right? Because it keeps us from doing other things. Our mind's in a pretty wholesome place when we're doing devotional activities. But it's also limited, right? The whole point of those is to realize, oh yeah, this is a raft to help me cross the flood. And the flood is the simile the Buddha used more than probably any other simile to describe our very human situation of, so much of what we construct scares us and agitates our heart and stimulates lust and greed and stimulates hate and resentment and envy and jealousy. So that's the flood, that all those obsessive tendencies in our mind, mental activities that aren't for my well-being and aren't for your well-being or aren't for anybody's well-being, right? And that's a lot of our day, the mental activity that's spinning, not really helping anybody. That may not be, our thoughts, mental activities, and the meaning that all that constructs. It may be not despicable or terrible, but not really going anywhere, that it has deep value, not onward leading to release, the release of suffering. So we want to use these teachings as strategically as counterweights to illuminate, as a counterweight, it illuminates what's not being seen. In the same way we might use identities. Like when we start talking about class or other sort of ways that groups of people have been marginalized, taken advantage of, race, class, body shape, around gender. When we start sort of talking about these different identities, it's not that helpful to cling to these identities, but it can illuminate what's going on in our society, in our families. Oh, we see a little bit more clearly the patterns that were already there. So it's the same with teachings like Anatta, right? We're using it strategically to observe the construction of self, to actually discover that self is a construction. And part of the way that we construct a sense of mark, in my case, me, is, part of that concept that my mind constructs is the sense of continuity, like, yeah, that was Mark. It's like any thought I have about the past, that was me. So when I have a memory, part of that memory is, part of the construction of that memory is that whoever that was is this guy here, right? So we're constructing, that's part of constructing a sense of self, is that sense of continuity. But one of the things, if you keep practicing what we did tonight, where we use we kind of use maybe physicality to help ground whatever you do to help sort of settle into the present moment, and then recognize there are just these 6 things being known, so that when when we space out or for whatever reason because of habit, a strong sense of self arises around something your mind constructed, then to be grateful, because that's exactly what we want to see. Wisdom needs to see, oh, sense of self, me, has shown up. And to have a respectful sense of awe. This is really dependent arising. It was one of our Buddhist Studies course, maybe last spring, I think we did dependent origination. But it's really one of the brilliant things the Buddha had to do to his students, and so that means us, because it's alive 2,600 years later. He had to somehow map out how it is that nature, natural processes, how it is that something that's seemingly as personal as me suffering, how can that arise when it's just a natural process, empty of self? How can there be this very human, seemingly real, vivid, poignant, heartbreaking experience of suffering, my suffering, your suffering, when this is a natural process? So that's what dependent origination, or that teachings on dependent co-arising, it's described different ways, translated different ways. But it's the Buddha mapping out, what is that natural process that creates the appearance of somebody suffering? And how it's like a whirlpool that has its own sort of feedback mechanism, samsara, just keeps it going. And after a certain amount of being diluted by this construction, we stop being interested, we just take it for granted. It's of course, I'm a human being, this is what it's like, you're a human being. There's me, and then there's the world out there. We have all these sort of thoughts, and they don't even actually make that much sense, but we're not bringing that kind of critical interest to it. And the great thing is, we don't have to, it isn't like some weird mystery that we have to figure out with some intellectual brilliance. We just need to allow the moment to reveal itself. And maybe surprising to some of you, that one of the most important ingredients is feeling safe, which makes it really hard, because a lot of the times we don't feel safe or safe enough. Because if I'm really going to let the moment reveal itself, thoughts, bad habits, good habits, sensations, whatever's reverberating from the past, whatever it is here and now, if I'm going to really let that reveal itself in the space of the present moment, I have to feel relatively safe. And so much of the habit of constructing, fabricating a sense of self, because every self this mind has constructed, right? Have you noticed that the self always has a problem? And even when things are really good, the problem is, how do I hold on to this? Things are really good. I want to hold on. I don't want anybody messing with my good situation. So the self, it's almost like, by definition, has your mind ever constructed a sense of you where there weren't any problems? Maybe just kind of look. So that's sort of interesting. So that's why, the classic move in Buddhism is, if you have the talent and the time, is to develop a lot of concentration. Because that can help you feel safe. You feel good. I mean, that's really comes with the territory, having a quiet mind. The good feeling comes because the mind is retreating from a lot of the self-centered activity. That's kind of the process of developing concentration, like absorption concentration, as opposed to wisdom samadhi, just being settled enough to observe carefully the way it is. And the other way is to develop really good sila, become a good person, care about not harming, developing that those sort of relationships that are defined by generosity and kindness and tenderness, compassion, being forgiving, being patient, right? Because that also helps us feel safe when we're embedded in community in these sort of wholesome ways. So when we feel safe enough, we've done what we can to feel safe enough, then both in our formal sitting times, but informally all day long, we can just let it rip, in a sense. We let Mark be Mark. We let the body and the mind do what the body and the mind does, because we need it to reveal itself. The liberating process is seeing what it is, and even more, seeing what it isn't. But in any case, our life has to express itself in the context of a mind that's awake, that's interested, that's alert, that's sensitive, so that it's just comprehending what it is and what it isn't. And ultimately, not self isn't something, it's really a realization about what's not here. That's the insight. Like we're observing, this is being known, this is being known, this is being known, it's endlessly, right? And then at some point, it just dawns on the mind, naturally, spontaneously, it just dawns on the mind what's not here. That whatever this is, it's not referring back to me in the way that was always presumed. It just dawns on the mind. And the mind is changed by that, and depending on the depth of that insight. But that insight, gets repeated, gets seen over and over again, and that confidence grows. And some of you have heard of stream entry. The first stage of awakening is really that point where the mind has seen that, wisdom has seen that enough times that there's no going back. Like that. It's described in the early Buddhist tradition as that doubt. There's no doubt about what the mind has seen. That this experience, never has, never will, never can. It doesn't refer back to anything. So even though, we feel, no, this is definitely happening to me, this good thing or this bad thing or whatever. So it doesn't deny that very human experience we're all having. It just understands what it is. It's not confused by the experience. It's not misinterpreting our experience. That's what goes away, is the misinterpretation, the misunderstanding, the misperception. That's the only thing that goes away. This is from Shokni Rinpoche, a Tibetan teacher that I did a retreat with a long time ago. He wrote I think a pretty nice book called Carefree Dignity. That was a while ago when that book came out. And in that book, he has this quote: "The basic meaning of confusion is to believe something to be in a way it is in fact not. Is to believe something to be in a way it in fact is not. Meditation should allow us to realize or know the natural state, what really is. In other words, meditation is to be free from the mistakenness of believing something to be that isn't. Meditation is to be free from the mistakenness of believing something to be that isn't. That's why we say meditation is more a matter of getting rid of something than achieving something." So, going back to that simile of the snake and the rope, you see why, when we talk about being open, being mindful, being present, being aware, it really has that element of humility, Like, we can't really be open and at the same time think this is what's going on, like in a fixed way or with a certainty. And you'll see that, like, when you settle into being mindful of your breath coming in and your breath going out, you see that as you develop some continuity, the idea that you're watching your breath coming in and going out goes away. Because you can't be holding that concept and sort of projecting that concept, I'm observing my breath, on the experience and be close to the experience. At some point, the mind has to be free of that overlay, I'm watching the breath. Same thing with just generally with meditation, like if you think you're meditating, you still haven't built up enough momentum in your meditation, right? Because the mind is still dominated by the thought that there's somebody here sitting and meditating. Now, that thought may arise, but if it's just seen as a thought, well, then it's not a problem. But if that sort of is the central truth, I'm at common ground, it's Monday night, I'm meditating, then that mind is diluted. We call it diluted, right? Because it's not seeing something for what it is. There's a thought, I'm at common ground, it's Monday night, and I'm meditating. But wisdom is an understanding that's a thought being known. So that thought is sort of that construction. And then it creates all kinds of problems, because then it's something that has to be defended. So if I get the EBGBs and start to move, then that sense of mark starts to hurt, because I want to be a good meditator, or at least I don't want people to think I'm a bad meditator. This is from Larry Rosenberg. He wrote a book, Living in the Light of Death. Larry is one of the founding teachers of Cambridge Insight, maybe the first urban center like Common Ground here in the West or in America, in that most recent wave of Buddhism coming here to the West, what we call insight meditation or Vipassana meditation. So it's been around for a while in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he's taught for many years at IMS. He's an old man now. He doesn't do that much teaching anymore. The problem with our attachments is not really the things themselves, the objects, the people, the achievements. The problem is that we make self out of them. I am the owner of a Lexus, the president of a company, the father of 3 fine children. We create a self out of these things, and we believe that that is who we are. And when we think of dying, we imagine losing these things, and we're terrified. But what we're most afraid of is losing the sense of self. And we see that, like if we could just track today, like if somehow our sort of mental activity got recorded, and then tonight we just looked through it, and we just saw how one way or another the mind, because of its habits, reconstructed the sense of self all day long. I'm the person eating too fast. I'm the person doing good. I'm the person who wants, and just to see that and to begin to sense what it is. It's a squeeze. It's always a squeeze on the heart. Any identity, when it's held wrongly, seen or understood as something apart, hurts. And it just like really builds. And that hopefully gets turned into more interest. What is this pattern? This natural process of reasserting a sense of self over and over again. It's like Malcolm Gladwell's book says, you have to see something 10,000 times before it really sinks in what it is, what's going on. Like that's just what that is. It's just a construction, a fabrication. And then a little later he writes, the practice of not selfing, not creating a self out of attachments, is a simple but subtle one. It isn't necessary to reject the selves that we create. Actually, pushing them away is just another form of clinging. I'm the one who's not a self, or I'm definitely not that self. All we have to do is clearly see that that act of creating self. It is a simple matter of awareness. In that moment of seeing and silent understanding, the self falls away. It can't withstand the bright light of clear awareness. And I think another way of saying that is, one of the natural causes for the sense of self is that lack of clarity, that lack of interest. Right? It arises in the dark, you could say. It doesn't arise in the light of wisdom and awareness. And just, you can experiment, we know kind of how our minds construct selves, the things we take personally in our life. So you could bring to mind a humiliating experience that happened recently, or something you have a lot of pride in, or some hope that you have, or some fear or anxiety that you have. But we could all do that right now, and we could observe that pattern getting triggered, but now having prompted wisdom and awareness. Even the fear of death, someday I'm going to die. This is, I think some of you know, because I tell this story, at some frequency at least, but way before, or it's right when I started meditating, but it began with somewhat of a bang, with this reflection. I'd been doing a lot of reading, but I hadn't really started formally meditating. I didn't really have any instruction except from some books. But I was really obsessed about death. So I think I actually was lying down doing this meditation. And I imagined being dead. And because I was curious, what would that be like? And how am I going to relate to this? The fact that I am going to die. And, and so I was there and just tried my best to imagine. Of course, it's just it's just imagining. And then I noticed, this is now, I can articulate it differently maybe than at the time, but I think I really understood, because as things were getting really quiet, and because, no, not that, because I'm dead, don't forget, And so it was getting, and then this sort of sense of self, this kind of very tender, it was really beautiful, poignant, oh, honey, you're dead, that just sort of arose just out of habit energy. And there was enough space, enough wisdom that saw that clearly arise, that sort of, I don't know if you'd call it sadness or tenderness, but it saw that construction of a self that was sad to have lost its life, right? It saw it vividly, clearly, and wisdom had a response. Who's this a problem for? It just asked that question. Okay, you're feeling some sadness that Mark is dead. Who's this a problem for? And it just, in that moment, it was like a powerful insight. It really changed my life. But it's in that moment, again, now talking about it 40 some years later, with a lot more understanding. But it was, the mind looked for the self and didn't find it. Who is this a problem for? Where is the person who's sad that he's going to die? But a person wasn't found. Do you ever find that person? Let us know. We don't find any of that, whatever the particular context that the mind has created, where it seems like this refers back to me or to somebody, we don't find that somebody. We find experience being known. These 6 things like I was talking about. And that just, I became hooked that day, right? I never looked back. Meditation was the most important thing in my life because I saw the power of that simple investigation. Like it really changed my life. I was a little disoriented for a while, but I always tell people it was right before I had left one job and I arranged it so I didn't have to start my next job for like 3 months or 4 months, I forget. And I was going to go to Alaska, out west, to Alaska, and backpack. And so I left a day or so later from Washington, D.C., where I'd been working, and flew home to Minneapolis before going out west. And I had to go buy some stuff at REI, not the store it is now, but way back. They had another store in South Minneapolis. And I walked out, and I walked right into a plate glass window. Because I was just a space cadet. I mean, just because I was disoriented about what had happened. And the glass broke, and I got cut, and it was sort of, this is sort of an aside, but just it's kind of funny that I was afraid the store manager was going to make me pay for it, and he was afraid I was going to sue him. So we were both having this conversation afterward, after I got some Band-Aids on me. But anyway, just the point I want to make, though, is it was just that interest in looking at experience. Like, what is the nature of the self, that sad mark that arose, right? Who is this? Who is this? No, it's just that, it was just that habit, right? The mind, that's how we relate to life. So when we feel that really poignant wave of nostalgia, which, is a pretty common emotion that we can have, or we get moved, all the ways we get moved. You see a little bunny that's been injured by a car that hit it, or whatever next experience, or beautiful sunset. Just to really notice the poignancy of that emotional thought, whatever it is, and just let it be what it is. Not presume it's referring back to somebody having a deep experience, or a beautiful or terrible experience. It's just that being known. So you're not taking anything away, you're just seeing it's just what it is, instead of the sort of projection that it's happening to me. This is from Joseph Goldstein. To awaken from illusion of taking concepts to be the reality, to awaken from the illusion of taking concepts to be the reality, so that we can live in a clear awareness of how things actually are. This is from his book, One Dharma. He describes being on a river rafting trip, and they had one little inflatable kayak when they were resting, so he was sort of messing around the rapids, and he got sucked into one of those holes. I've never done a lot of river rafting or kayaking, but he got pulled under, and he had his life vest on, and he got buoyed up and pulled under, and several times before the whirlpool kind of spit him out. And he says it's like that, observing strong emotions. When we have some drama going on, we can observe how we get sucked in, and then we're literally lost. We're just spinning. It feels very personal. There's no thought when we're spinning that this is just emotion being felt, right? It's as real as anything is real. But then the practice is like the life preserver. It just sort of eventually we come above the water and we realize, oh yeah, it's just an emotional storm being known, felt, very vividly, very real, except it's just this being known. And back in it, right? And then we come up. So that's called good practice. We might think that, oh no, I would never want to confess to a teacher that that's what my sit was like, or that was my day was like. But it's good. We have to observe in real time. We have to see the getting sucked in, and we have to see having been sucked in being spat out or come back to the surface, to the openness, where wisdom can see, oh yeah, it's just this being felt, experienced. And that's it, not this is being, I'm experiencing this, right? Because that's the habit. It's like, if something feels this strongly, this intensely, there has to be a me. But we can see directly in our experience, no, there's this experience, sensitivity. And a lot of what we're practicing, like when we're sitting, people who have some good momentum in their practice, just because their body appears to be released and still and serene, their body and mind seems that way, doesn't mean that what's moving isn't quite wild and intense. It just means there's enough wisdom to just let things come and go. But what's coming to go might be very strong experience, emotions, thoughts, images, sensations. That's why, sometimes people will have a sit and will feel like that was like 3 or 4 lifetimes. It was so rich, so intense, so wild, so out of the box, and so empty. In the sense, empty just means it didn't refer back. The experience was empty, referring back to anything more than what it was. It was just what it was, and empty of anything else. So this is what Joseph says after sharing that about getting sucked into the whirlpool. When we're not mindful, the strong force of emotion pulls us under, and their powerful energies toss us about. Mindfulness is like wearing the life vest. The emotions still come, but we are protected from drowning in them. We no longer take them to be self or I, but rather experience them as part of the flowing current of life. There's a great sense of freedom when we don't identify so completely with every passing mind state and mood. The mystic poet Rumi wrote, what I want is to leap out of this personality and then sit apart from that leaping. I live too long where I can be reached. On the subtlest level, we give birth to the sense of I when we identify with consciousness or awareness itself, thereby creating a sense of the witness or observer separate from experience. Even when we understand the transitory selfless nature of the body, thoughts and emotions still have a strong feeling that we're the one who knows all these things. And this is very common in sitting practice. I'm sure some of you have noticed this, where you feel like you're in this not reactive state, like you're just letting things come and go, but there's still a strong identity with the observer or the one who's witnessing all this activity. And what will catch our attention in that experience is it's still tight, and yet I'm letting things come and go, bodily sensations and the sounds in the room and thoughts that come and go. But there's still the squeeze in the heart is being the observer, having to be the observer observing. It's still a weight. It's still a psychic weight because the mind is constructing something and then clinging to it. It's like a lot of unnecessary activity. But the mind is oblivious to it because it hasn't learned to be interested in everything that's showing up. So when you sense that you're the observer of your experience, notice that the observer can also be observed. It sounds a little funny to say it that way. Oh yeah, this is just the observer being known, right? And we'll feel that stance of being the observer as a subtle or not so subtle squeeze or weight. Like, that's not necessary. It can fall away too. But it has to be seen. And Joseph writes, in meditation, one helpful way to cut through the identification of as observer or witness is to language our experience in a passive voice. Now, this can drive some people crazy, but you can experiment and see if it helps you. For example, he writes, to consider hearing sounds, to hearing as sounds being known, or thinking as thoughts being known. We can think of our experience of the body as sensations being known. This way of expressing what is happening takes the I out of the picture. What remains is luminous awareness, spontaneously knowing, no I, no self, there at all. And maybe I'll just end with this poem, and there'll be time for maybe one or two questions. This is from one of the bhikkhunis at the time of the Buddha, Vajira. And after her alms round one day, when she collected her meal, their one meal, she went to a place to sit down. And then Mara, and some of you, maybe most of you know, Mara is sort of the personification of all that is sort of self-centered and misunderstood, this wisdom, absent of wisdom, right? So Mara, the evil one, desiring to arouse fear, trepidation, and terror in the bhikkhuni, in the Buddhist nun Vajira, desiring to make her fall away from concentration, approached her and addressed her in verse, right? So her own mind, basically. By whom has this being been created? Where is the maker of the being? Right? Who made you? Where is the being arisen? Where does the being cease? So a lot of philosophical questions around self. Then Vajira, understanding Mara was speaking, desiring to arouse fear, trepidation, and terror in her, replied to Mara in verses. Why now do you assume a being, a self, Mara? Is that your speculative view? This is a heap of sheer formations. This is just activities of the mind and body. Here no being is found. Just as with an assemblage of parts, the word chariot is used, so when the aggregates exist, there is the convention of being. It is only suffering that comes to be, suffering that stands and falls away. Nothing but suffering comes to be, nothing but suffering ceases. When the mind understands the way it is, suffering ceases. When the mind misunderstands the way it is, projects a sense of self, suffering arises. It's that simple. And that's what we're observing. When we have some insight, that's what we observe all the time. It's like when we're suffering, it's like the practice kicks back in. Well, that's interesting. Oh, look at, taking things personally, projecting self. Oh yeah, suffering. When there's this, there's that. With the arising of this comes the arising of that. It's one of the teachings of the Buddha. With the ceasing of this ceases. Right? With the ceasing of taking things personally, getting attached, suffering ceases. And this is something we can go check out right in our own life. So there's only a couple of minutes left, but maybe time for one question either from here or in the room or people on Zoom. On Zoom, you can just unmute yourself. Is the speaker on, Brian? Yeah. Anybody in the room have a question? Yeah. Peter, want to pass the mic over?
Is this on? Yeah. I was just thinking about trauma and like traumatic events and wondering how that might sow yourself more or like create more of a sense of self because of the suffering that is involved in, and wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, probably, but I don't, I think it may be specific to each situation. And, but the important thing is, the natural instinct, if you have that sense that that's going on in your life, is, the healing process is learning how to feel safe. Because the unwinding of whatever that trauma is, that will be a natural process, but it's dependent on safety. Because it's like so much learning, and in the awakening process itself, it's intense. And so if we're already in a defensive stance in life because there have been experiences we couldn't digest, so they got buried in our bodies, let's say, hidden, kept at some distance, right? So then relaxing and allowing the moment to reveal itself is threatening, because relaxing means stopping all of those processes we use to keep ourselves some distance from the pain we haven't digested yet, we haven't felt yet, because it felt too much, it was overwhelming. So it's just how it is with spiritual life. We need to have a relatively balanced life where we can access some safety. And initially, a lot of us have to do that work of how do we find more safety in our life. That is our spiritual practice. How do we heal? Part of it is, just the different therapeutic modalities that can help sort of ventilate that pain. So we have language that helps us have a different, more open relationship than the one we had, which was only about running and hiding and burying. Yeah. Fortunately, these days, there's a lot more written about working with trauma than there was even 10 or 15 years ago. It's really, there's just more wisdom around just in our culture. So we have one more week next week. As I mentioned maybe 2 weeks ago, feel free to send me questions, and I'll try to weave it into the week 4. And we'll have small groups at the end of week 4. Appreciate everybody showing up online and in person. So let's stay together for one more week, and I'll see you then.